thank you for joining, and mostly a good afternoon to you. Good morning if you are in that time zone, good evening if you're in the time zone to my right as I look at the map. My name is Ben Mcleish. I'm the Director of Engagement and Advocacy at Digital Science. I mostly cover Dimensions and Altmetric, and today we are looking at specifically Altmetric to help UK institutions uncover trends in open access and prepare for the REF 2021. The dominant portion of this webinar will be about how to gather data about the REF. There will be a couple of good guide points about how to involve open access in that as well. So to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about, I will very briefly again run through how Altmetric actually works. I won't explain sort of what it is because that becomes very obvious through explaining how it works. And then I will go into essentially three specific use cases, two really, but one looking backward, one looking forward, and then one that's been done by one of our customers over in the Netherlands. The first one is that as the REF approaches, there is the desire and the need for potentially looking at continuing case studies, that is prior submissions to REF 2014, where we now want to have a look at what further evidence there has been in the time period that has elapsed up to 2020, 2021, where additionality, as it used to be called, or extra use and impact and dissemination of work can be demonstrated as to have backed up the original submissions from the prior REF and leading into the REF 2021 publications. So having a look at how our users can grab the data from a particular unit of assessment or perhaps multiple units of assessment and can very quickly, in a matter of moments, get the various distribution and the audience and the attention and the discussions that surround the publications that will be submitted in the coming year or so. So we'll have a look at that. It's a very, very similar workflow, so you'll feel that I'm perhaps repeating myself, but it's worth looking at. Have no fear, anybody who's on the call or anybody who watches this, I'm not going to use a UK institution in order to benchmark the data publicly. I'm not going to do that. I will instead be using our good friends at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich as a proxy for an institution. Thanks to the good work at Dimensions, I can actually grab a real unit of assessment, but for publications that belong to them. It's one of the remarkable bits that we've done in terms of machine learning tagging of all publications in the world by UK REF guidelines. And then I'm going to leave the Explorer, and I'm actually going to show you what the Free University of Amsterdam, VUM Sadam, the VU as they call themselves, has done to do almost exactly the same work that we've done for the REF, but to now measure against the defined Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Then we'll go into a Q&A, and then I will stop talking, I promise. So that's what we've got there. Quick housekeeping. If you have any desires or issues or things, burning questions, there is a chat box, there is a Q&A box. You can use that in case you have audio or video issues. So far, people have said that they can hear me okay. We are recording the webinar. We will send the recording out after the webinar is over, as well as if there is a flood of questions that I can't answer on the call reliably, we will also get those to you afterwards as well. All right, how does the Altmetric Explorer work? How does the Altmetric service track attention to research? So we need three things. We need a piece of research that has a persistent identifier and that is mentioned in a source of attention online that we are actively tracking, whether that's a news site, a blog, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook pages, and so forth. That's really the three components that are required for an item to appear in our database. By research, we don't just mean articles. Of course, in the case of the REF, it is very useful that articles are a large component, but if anybody was at the LIS Bibliometrics event on Monday, you'll note that the uptake of data sets as an output that researchers are publishing more and more of these days. We, by research, do mean any format, as long as it does have an identifier. What you're seeing here on the right there happens to be a 3D video that's hosted on Figshare. That also has an identifier. It has a DOI that's minted automatically by Figshare, and therefore whenever that appears in a source of attention, we will be picking that up because we consider that to be a piece of research, even if it is not a even if it isn't an article itself. I am going to pause quickly. Somebody's having issues with audio at the moment. Can anybody else just quickly post and make sure that they can hear something? Like, if anybody can hear, can they let me know? And if I don't hear anything in the next, I don't know, 15 seconds. Yeah, quite a lot of people can say they can hear. I'm going to just quickly reply, try restarting the software, please. Sorry, everybody. Just want to make sure that we get that as sorted as possible. That is what we mean by research. I'm anticipating another question I've already seen. We, of course, don't just track DOIs. That is fine because DOIs are so prevalent. But if your publications have one of these, we are automatically looking for it. It doesn't matter if you're not a customer of ours. We have, from the beginning, said if these identifiers can be found within a news story as a link, or even as free text, if there's somebody's posted a DOI at the bottom of a piece of journalism, they're getting better at doing that all the time, we will detect that. If they are citing an article in a policy document, it doesn't have a DOI, but it does have a recognizable citation format, we will try and reverse that back to a potential record which can be compared against things like the Crossref database in order to then find the DOI. We are doing those kinds of steps with things like policy. But if it has one of these, as a rule, it is being looked for already. And when that data then comes into the Altmetric Explorer, you are then also able to filter by ORCID, which is fairly trivial when you understand how it works. Once we've got all of these data in one place, it is actually quite easy to build an ORCID filter because you simply ask the ORCID API to return to you the items that are associated with the ORCID you are putting in, and then you see in your results lists the items that have had attention that also are linked to that ORCID. So we don't track ORCIDs themselves, but once you're within the Explorer, doing an ORCID search does work. Because thanks to the ORCID API, the very robust API that they have. So that is sort of what we track in terms of identifiers. And here is where we look for attention. So there is the last count, I think it was 17 different sources. Some of them are historical, Sina Weibo, for example, LinkedIn, Google Plus, of course, shut down in April of last year. That's almost 1 year ago. My goodness, how time flies. So these are sources that, for one reason or another, became unavailable to us in actually almost all in 2015, well, weirdly. Sina Weibo was a policy thing about Chinese data leaving its shores. LinkedIn deprecated their search API, so we've held on to all of the other stuff that they had, but can't find new items. Everything else there, which is actually the dominant amount of where the attention does come from. These deprecated sources were quite small, luckily, in terms of their volume of attention. The rest of it is all alive and kicking and is bringing in something like 120 million mentions in total of about 20 million publications, articles, book chapters, and all the rest of the types of research that we look at. So it is a big data set. Additionally, you will also see, as a customer of ours, if you have a Web of Science license, we'll be able to connect that data in. So you would see, for example, on an article level, the citations that Web of Science have found. And if you're a customer of ours, and even if you are not a Dimensions customer, we have also automatically put in the Dimensions citations. Those are citations found exactly the same way as any other leading ANI service, and with a couple of modern updates as well. So we do track a little bit more and have some more refined citation tracking services in there, but it is essentially this, when we say citation, we mean the same thing as what you would expect. Those are available for anybody and can even be downloaded from the database as well. So that is essentially offered alongside all of the other metrics around social engagement, news coverage, Wikipedia usage, and so forth that the Altmetric Explorer offers. So it's a little bit of extra stuff. Now, since I have a mostly ref audience, I'm going to say very loud and clear that there is an attention score in the Altmetric service. We do order the, I won't say rank, I'll say order. We order the items in many different ways, and one of those is you can look by attention volume. This is not to be used as a proxy for quality, please, anybody. This is simply one of the ways in which you can order these data, so you can see very quickly at a glance what is getting a lot of buzz, where is there a large audience, where has there been a loud amount of online discussion. That loudness, that volume, is deduced in the following 3 different ways. One, there are just a sheer huge amount of mentions out there, let's say. So for this particular example, where we're nudging up to almost 3,000 in the score, if it also had that sort of donut, in other words, very distributed, lots of different colors, those correspond to the different places online where the item is being talked about. So red is news, yellow is blogs, green is YouTube videos that have mentioned an article in their description field, that traditional trademark light blue is Twitter, purple is policy, and so forth. That tells me it's been distributed very evenly across all of the different places we have tracked. So it has been very well distributed. That score tells me that there most likely is a heavy amount of news, probably policy, and most likely social media attention, because having thousands of tweets will get you a score in the thousands, with a couple of caveats. And that is that if one Twitter user, who is perhaps also the researcher who published the item, if they tweet that item 3,000 times, the score will indeed just be 1, because we know very well that that is one person, one researcher, or one account resharing the item over and over again. We capture every tweet, but we don't just inflate the score. We're trying to demonstrate that there is a real volume of lots of eyeballs happening. The second one is that, of course, a tweet is not the same as a news article or a blog, and so we also weight these sources slightly differently. A tweet is worth about 1. So if you get 300 tweets from 300 different accounts, you're looking probably at a score of 300, and I'll save that probably for my final qualification in just a moment. A news story is obviously not the same as that. Nobody can just write a news story the same as anybody can tweet. And so a news story is worth something like 8, so that the volume, so that the score reflects the fact that there is an extra value in terms of having broken through to media coverage, which of course researchers value and institutions value greatly. Blogs, slightly less so, they're worth something like 5. So that as the attention increases and as it goes through its different channels, we are reflecting in the score the nature of its online distribution. It is not for quality, and anybody who uses it for quality is going to be banned for life from my birthday parties. So it is just simply there as a tool in order to, for example, just see very quickly what sort of buzz are we getting. Now, my final qualification about, for example, 300 Twitter accounts getting 300 as a score is that we do differentiate between the types of Twitter accounts out there. There are general users such as myself. I'm a non-scientist. I don't describe myself as a journalist or a PhD or a doctor in my profile. I perhaps mostly share videos about global automotive evolution, and then also every now and again, perhaps I do share a piece of research as it comes across my desk, perhaps. That's a general user. Then we do have accounts that typically would have a lot of followers, perhaps they're even verified. They will regularly share lots of different research from lots of different publications, lots of different titles, and perhaps they also describe themselves as a science communicator or a journalist or a doctor or a practicing medical person or something like that. Those are valued higher because those are nodes of distribution that come from, let's say, the academy or from deliberate focus on research translation into public discourse. And then there is a final type of Twitter account that if I describe it for you, you will probably guess what type of account it is. It is an account that regularly shares items all from the same publication, all from the same journal, all from the same node of publications. And never shares anything from any other publication at all. That most likely is the marketing affiliated account of a particular publication. We capture those as well, and we count those at a lower score than even the general public. Because of course it is marketing, it's not quite the same as the kind of impact you would receive by having reached a member of the public or a science communicator. All are equally capturable and should be captured, but we weight them ever so slightly so that you do get a sense in the score of the kind of audience that you're finding. So you will see those. That is basically a description of what that is. So I suppose to summarize, We follow all of those various different domains, all those news sites, all those blogs. There are something like 5,000–6,000 blogs now, maybe on getting close to about 15,000 news sites. We follow Twitter, of course. We have a Twitter feed that comes from them, where we have defined all the long and short links that we want to capture. We do follow things like bit.ly and feed proxy. So even if people share research that's hidden behind a shortening service, we do lengthen everything to work out whether it does go to Springer Nature or Elsevier, and then capture that item. So we track all of those different domains. We look in those domains for all those different publications, however they may be cited or linked to. We collect all that together in one place, per article and in one database. We then display the items on a details page for a publication and in the general database, which we'll go into in a minute. And for news and policy documents, we do that data mining I described. So because the news often says, on April the 14th, 2016, Shimei Locke published an article on Zika, that gives us a title, it gives us an author name, it gives us, they may also, in that real example, actually, they also say the word nature, then it gives us a potential title, and then our mining goes and sees if there is one result for that identifiable publication. If it is there, then we capture it. Same thing with the policy documents as well. And then there is the Open Syllabus project, which we load into the database as a database in itself. We take a full copy of what things are being used to teach in courses around the world so that we can represent that too. It is a smaller data set, again, than what you would see from news or Twitter, but it is in there. So those are harvested in a slightly different way than the others, which mostly rely on things like link tracking. So when customers come to us, of course, we need to work out what stuff is theirs, because we know that something is research, we know where it's been mentioned, and so our customers come to us very often with an open access, a repository, very often an open access repository, but they might come to us with something like DSpace or ePrints. They may have elements from Symplectic, our sister organization, or they may have Pure, or they may have Converus or things like that. And so we then integrate seamlessly with those. We have connectors that pull the departmental structure and the identifier and the author name, and we then replicate it so that that user, that institution, when they log into our system, will see their departments, their authors, however they have structured their research footprint in their databases. We obviously brand it for people, and those update extremely regularly. I was once told that it's actually possible to update on an hourly basis if you have something like Elements or Pure, because it is so easy to do it. I think it's less than hourly though, and I think it doesn't have to be hourly either. And for anybody who doesn't have those, do not despair. There is actually a CSV update wizard. There is the ability to, with our system, upload your own departmental structures, upload your publications, and have them reflected in the system as well. It was developed about 2 years ago and is quite ready for all the different formats that people have got their data in when it comes to just manual curation of it in a CSV spreadsheet. It's on the minor side. People don't tend to do that because they mostly do have some sort of research infrastructure, but we equally have quite a few very important customers who don't, and so they should be able to get some sense of what's there. Right, having said all of that, how do you make use of a system like this in order to, let's say, evaluate the prior ref submissions as continuing case studies? I want to go and have a look at our 2010 to 2014 publications that we submitted to the ref. Forgive me, by the way, if I get the date slightly wrong on that. So I know it was up to 2014. I'm not clear whether it was 2010 or perhaps 2009, but let's say that tranche of older items. So the way that one of our users would do this is by gathering the identifiers of those past submissions, because a unit of assessment, when it comes to research outputs, as we see it, is just a list of identifiers. It is just a list of the publication identifiers themselves. We don't need anything else. We then load those into Altmetric, and I'm going to do this right now. And then in Altmetric, you can then define and say, I actually only want the attention that happened between, let's say, January 1, 2014, until the present moment, right? Because I'm going to be looking at the old publications, but I want to see the attention that's happened since I did the submission. I want to tell the story that has happened since then. And then our customers can export every single one of those mentions, every single news publication with the item that was referred to in it, and then pull all that data out. They can do local visualizations. They can collate and see very quickly the notable attention that's happened in it. They can actually have a look, because we provide the links to every online platform and every story and every Wikipedia page and every patent that has made use of your research, or every policy document that has used you in the references, to then begin to tell those narratives, to highlight those successes in outreach and engagement and audience. So I'm going to do that now. Over here is our Explorer. For a typical university, it will look like this. This is, of course, for just one institution, but we have the ability to begin here, which is, like it's actually, sorry, I lowballed it a little bit. It's 27.7 million items that we are aware of, 14 million that have been tracked, and now 123.1 million mentions of data in the world. This is everything we have ever found for anybody. Now, I went over and took all of the items that belong in the ref category of 2021 as clinical medicine, and took the items from that published by LMU Munich. Now, I'll go into a very brief detour as to how I did that, but the people who are on this call, the people who are looking at this that come from UK ref submissible institutions, you probably already have these lists, or you're working tirelessly to create them, right? To define your publications by which unit of assessment they sit in. I did it a cheeky way by going into Dimensions, right? The other digital science product, because we already mapped, as I mentioned, research categories, there it is. We mapped the various units of assessment already to the world's data. And so I simply selected clinical medicine. That gives me an absurdly big list at 7.6 million publications from around the world of all time that would fit into clinical medicine. And I then filtered down by, I won't do it all now, but I typed in Ludwig Maximilian University Munich. I then also defined my publications year as 2010 to 14, right? So I took that and I simply exported that and then kept only the identifiers. That gives me a list that looks a little bit like this. Forgive me while, it actually opened quite quickly. There we are. So those are the, how many? 4,279 publications that sit within clinical medicine at LMU. So LMU is now going to face the indignity of a UK ref submission. We're going to pretend that they have to submit. We're going to go and have a look and see how they did. So to ferret out the attention that has received manually would take probably decades if you're going to do it by hand. You're going to have to look for every permeation of every link of every item, whether it's a DOI item or whether it actually links to elsevier.com, right? Science Direct. It's impractical. No one's ever been able to really do it. That's why services like Altmetric do exist. Now, I am in my full database, and I'm simply going to ask it now, looking in the full database, I'm going to simply upload those identifiers. So it recognizes very quickly how many lines there are. If I save it, even more quickly, it'll tell me they're all DOIs, of course. They could be a mixture, could be PubMed IDs, could be archive IDs. It would then break down the number of different identifiers that it has found. And I'm simply going to ask the system now, please tell me, please show me all the attention that those items have ever received since they were published. And it's done. So there are something like 2,300 items that were tracked, 1,700 that actually have had some attention, 11,500 mentions. LMU Munich is doing pretty well. Now, there is some large-scale summaries here. A lot of this attention will have happened as the items were published. You can see this item published in May 2011 will have no doubt received a lot of its attention at the time. So instead, we are now going to jump over to the section where I can now export the mentions that I want. So I don't want everything that came before 2014, right? I want to go back to January the 1st, why not, 2014, and we could just say up until today, right? Obviously, when you come to a submission, it's going to be maybe next year. I think it's June, right? So I'm going to define the mentions of these items, even if they were published a long time ago, have to have occurred in the period between Ref 2014 and now, or in the future, whenever I am. And I can filter those 11,500 mentions. It's now going to pull back for me, takes a bit of a while, 6,213 mentions. That is everything from Twitter to Wikipedia usage to patents that have been filed around the world that cite you in their patent references, and it presents it to me in reverse order. So LMU Munich can tell right away, it was actually the 28th of February of this year. That was the final mention of the batch of items I've just searched that are in there. And as I go back, it'll then go back in time. This is obviously not how we're going to be using these data. This is, of course, an immensely long list, but we can see they had some pretty interesting news articles happening quite recently. We're still looking at this year. It'll go back 28th to the 1st is the next ones, and so forth. So that gives me my raw data, which I can now just simply export. I can just help myself to that. And if I wanted to come back and work on it later, I could save this as a search. If I hit that button, it'll save it over there. I have actually already done that. While this downloads, I'll go and show you actually. So I have saved it already as, there it is, LMU Munich Ref Clinical Medicine 2010 to 2014. There is the one I actually just clicked. It is given it a sort of a default name. I can rename it and so forth. I'm actually going to delete that because it's confusing, because it's exactly the same as the one I just did. So that is now finished downloading. And I can open that up, and it'll then show you the thousands, what was it, 6,000, something like that, 6,000 references of those items online since then. So we can see the tweets with the IDs. I need to always make these a bit bigger so that it actually expands correctly. The news stories, where it was, the links, the articles. There are even fields of research in there. And then to speak on things like open access, we will also be able to filter these data by open access or not open access at some point as well. So we can do that. So you can see immediately what was mentioned, what was the score, what were the various identifiers. This is the data that I can then use to build my report into the continuing case studies. It's as simple as that. We went from this to all the places online where it actually was referred to. So very, very easy to do. It can be done for multiple units of assessment. Top tip, if you have something like an open access repository, or you have something like Pure or Elements, and you have within those groups defined for each unit of assessment, those will be imported into the Explorer for you. So you wouldn't have to upload every single unit of assessment the way I have done it, or ask your users, your researchers, to upload their identifiers for their individual assessments. You could actually treat them almost as a type of department in those larger CRIS systems, or CRI systems. I always feel annoyed that CRIS does always includes the word system in its abbreviation. And so they would appear essentially in the Explorer very much like the way that we show departments currently. These are reflected from the structure that we would receive either from the repository or the CRIS. So this, of course, is very, very simplified. You may have 700 departments and sub-departments. You may also have groups within your CRIS that correspond to the various units of assessment. Those would then appear here as you have named them in your CRIS. Might be an interesting way of approaching it. It may not be, it may be too much work. So that is how you can do continued case studies. It's an easy way of gathering the data. Now, with the next step, which would be to have a look at what we are actually going to submit. I need to actually have a look at the current data that's out there. So I have also done another search. I'm going to close this because we end up with too many items. I now did I think it was 2015, yep, 2015 to 2020. So LMU Munich's current ref submission. It's never been seen before, even by then. So these would be the theoretical but actual clinical medicine items that are out there. There it is, 2015 to 2020. In this case, they actually have a slightly bigger corpus. They have 5,600 items that correspond to clinical medicine. Exactly the same process where we can go in and look at the full database. It's reset the scholarly identifiers. I drop them in, I save them. I ask the system to run the search for those items. And now I have my items, right? So 72,800 mentions. And because we're now looking at current attention, you can also use all of the other visualizations that we have. So in addition to being able perhaps to go and help ourselves to the many mentions that are out there, because we're looking at from 2014 till now, we might also be quite interested in having a look at the timeline of the attention. You can do this with the other data as well. It's just you have to restrict it because it'll, of course, always show you whatever we were looking at 2010 onwards, right? So even if you restrict to current attention, this visualization is showing you all of the attention that these items have received and when it happened. So here we are looking at the items that really do belong to this and when the attention occurred. So we can see the attention is increasing. There are some spikes here that we could investigate. All of this is clickable, so I could go and click and see on that same mentions tab the exact items for May 2019. I could find out what that spike consists of. Is it just that a lot of our publications at LMU Munich in the clinical medicine unit of assessment did well that month, or does it happen to be an item that was internationally recognized? And in fact, it's most of those Twitter mentions and those 175 news mentions are all around roughly the same item. So you can have a look at that. You could screenshot this and export it. You could see, for example, the policy items that have used this in the research in their own publications. And critically, you can also have a look at things like demographics. So your cumulative audience, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be in the news space, or we want to perhaps understand where the policy organizations are from that are citing this. So we can see LMU Munich's clinical medicine publications having an effect in the United States, having an effect in Germany, probably the RVMF in Germany, which is a clinical and pharmacists sort of organization, 37 policy documents from 2 different sources in the UK. So we can see that, again, easily screenshotable, demonstrates real reach. I mean, the news reach of LMU Munich's clinical medicine publications is pretty staggering, I must say, although they could do some work on reaching more people in Greenland, I think. Again, we could go to our mentions tab. Again, I can decide to download everything because these really are all of the mentions that we as an institution have received to what we are going to most likely be submitting in our ref. We could filter out certain sources. Maybe we think that tweets are not terribly scientific, and even though it does demonstrate social impact, we're going to demonstrate it a different way. So then perhaps I want to only include patents, I only want to include policy news, Wikipedia citations, Q&A posts from Stack Exchange, because that's where people are asking questions about research that does belong to us, faculty of 1,000 recommendations, maybe blogs as well, maybe we're going to be generous. And I can then filter that list by those items. You could, even if you wanted to be even more specific, you could define certain countries where the mentions are coming from. I only want to see the following sources in the Netherlands, in the UK, in the USA, in Australia, and so forth. Or you could, once again, limit your mentions for a certain time period if you wanted to, if you needed to. If the cutoff is a very specific day, which I think it is, you can define that as an endpoint so you're not declaring mentions that happen after the ref submission guidelines have stated. So very, very simple to do that. The download looks exactly the same. I can also, of course, save this, and I'm going to go and rename that in my saved searches in case I need to do multiple reports like this. I don't want to upload the items every single time. That would be my LMU Munich search. There we go, LMU Clinical Medicine 2014 to present, for example. Save that, and then that is ready for me to rerun next time. So if I click on one of these, it will give me exactly the place where I began, so I can have a look at that as well. So that is that sort of step. Like I say, plenty of visualizations to be getting on with, and so forth. Okay, now I'm going to show you something that actually sits outside of our Explorer, that comes from one of our customers. And they have done almost exactly the same as what I just showed you. So they have been batch uploading identifiers that correspond to a certain definition that they need in order to visualize and to measure and discover the reach of attention around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, that's SDGs as I will call them. For anybody who's not initiated, I'd imagine that very few on the call would need this, but the UN Sustainable Development Goals consist of 17 very specific areas of required development to improve human well-being, and that does include the environment. It's not just all about humans anymore. Those goals are scheduled to be achieved by 2030. So 9 and a bit years, right? Not that far away now. And they were announced quite a while ago. I think, forgive me, I think in the 1990s. And funders around the world are increasingly asking for information when a project is being suggested to them for funding. How are you contributing to one or more of the SDGs of the UN? And there will come a moment in 2030, or most likely before then, when funders will say, we now want to see evidence of what your cumulative achievements have been, what your contributions to research in these very well described 17 different areas has been, because that is going to be something upon which future funding is based. Those 17 development goals are defined by the UN themselves, listed beautifully on their website with lots of very nice graphics. Here they are for you, very easily discoverable. And in fact, in the place that we're about to go to, they are actually listed again. So we're looking at things like peace, justice, strong institutions, life below water. So we're looking at ocean health, climate action is the big one, zero hunger, no poverty. If you go and have a look at how humanity's doing on these, it is actually quite encouraging. Zero hunger in the 1980s was a thing that was laughed at, like we could ever achieve zero hunger. And the decrease in famine has been quite astounding to behold. And research infrastructure and research work in this area should be held up as one of the absolute reasons we were able to do this. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just political motivations or political machinations. This was the great achievements in improving things like harvesting and so forth. This is something that people on the call may well know much more about than myself, so I will stop talking. However, the VUM Sadam have taken their data and have actually looked at other institutions as well in what they call their Aurora Universities network. It includes things like institutions like Aberdeen, Innsbruck, Iceland, University of East Anglia is on here. They may even be on the call today. And various other places, and have essentially done exactly what I did. And we're just going to go and visit their website, because their website is laid out better than I could ever lay out any of my slides for you. So this is where they describe their work. There is even an animated GIF here. If you were to select that down here, it actually takes you through how it all works. But we're going to open the real one, just so you can get a sense of, when I say you do offline visualizations of our data, this is how it can look. So they use something called Power BI. So as far as it's from Microsoft, BI is probably business intelligence. So it is a tool that is free for use by really anybody. If you want to display data on the website, there's a small monthly or annual fee involved as well. It sounds like a pretty good deal, especially when you see what you can do with it. So they spend a couple of slides describing how this works, and don't worry about trying to read it all as I'm talking at you. The link will be sent around. It'll actually be embedded in the slides that I'll get over to you as well. But they talk about, in the first instance, taking something like zero hunger and then coming up with all of the keywords that would lead to a corresponding result from an ANI database or a research database, so that you can reliably pull back the thousands of items that correspond with that. So that is the method that they used in order to get to that group of identifiers that you saw me wrestle with earlier in the webinar, except they're not looking at the definition of a unit of assessment. Their definition now is everything to do with things like child hunger, starvation. They would use the word. They would look at things like crop failures and so on, all of these different keywords. And they talk about how they sort of did it and how they sort of gathered all these items together. And then they break them down into different visualizations. So here you can see VUM Sadam on the left, then there's East Anglia, Gothenburg, there's Aberdeen, Grenoble Alps, University of Innsbruck. And they, at this point, have just simply broken down how the outputs of all of those institutions that they have gathered the publications for, according to each long definition of these 17 goals, how it breaks down in terms of the focus of that institution, how many publications. So for University of East Anglia, about 33% of the corresponding items that they have found that belong to any sustainable development goal, 33% sit within the green one, which is probably good health and well-being. Now, BI allows you to filter out certain things. So you can include several different ways of analyzing this, and you can sort of move the size of this. It's pretty exciting to have a look at. So it's a lot of fun to play with. They then take a couple of extra steps. So, for example, in this one, they just locate where their institutions are with the amount of publications coming from them, and then they start to break them down into quadrants. And at this point, you actually start seeing Altmetrics show up. So here they're looking at the research on global goals influencing science and society. So we've now got our publications, and we can see the papers that belong to certain units of, it's so easy to say units of assessment, isn't it? Sustainable development goals. And how many of those, as a percentage, either appear in the top 10 most cited publications. So there they're looking at things like filtering it by a particular list of journals, or in terms of the citation metrics they may get from their citation provider. They may look at the number of items that are actually open access versus the ones that are not. There is the ability in the Explorer, for example, to filter by open access or closed access. You can do the same thing in an ANI database. You can do several different types of open access in things like dimensions. You've got things like unpaywall, which is what these guys used. So unpaywall supplied the open access data. So you can see 49% of items that can be called a corresponding piece of research for at least one of the SDGs is published open access. Probably quite a critical thing, that it's readable by the general public if it's about the general public overall. You can see here they were using Scopus and SciVal for these areas, and how many of these items as a percentage are appearing in policy related to a sustainable development goal. So there they have simply looked at our data, they've filtered the way I was filtering by things like news and Wikipedia, and they have said filter only by policy, download that amount, and then tell us, then we can see offline how many items are mentioned at least once, and what the percentage of that is for our total output for that area. So that is a very nice, very nifty way in which you can sort of do this. Then it gets really more complicated, and I will stop at this point, because at this point they start talking about mapping the papers in areas, or this one actually is to do with policy documents, so this one I can stick to. They start mapping on a sort of a quadrant for intensity, right? So how many items have appeared in 15 policy documents versus how many items you have had mentioned in at least one, and then maybe 10 policy documents and so forth, so they can see the intensity of that as well. Very cool, very nice. Very intuitive, actually, I think. They have some good stuff on here. It's openly available at Aurora, minus or hyphen network.global. I will get that link to you anyway. But when we say offline visualizations, that is an excellent example of how you can make something engaging, how it can be made to really display and put on show how your research maps when you look at certain things. And you can see it's very easily interacted with. This is a really great way of showcasing your work. And again, very, very similar as what I did in the previous slide. Okay, right, that's enough talking from me. I'm now going to have a look at the questions. I'll solicit more. I just need to delete the ones where people said that they could hear me. So there was a question about what non-DOI identifiers do you track. I think I've covered that one. So we do have a good list there. There we go. Somebody has said here, we have used Scopus citations in our Altmetric Explorer setup. Now we just have dimensions. Is support for Scopus API discontinued? We also have a subscription to Web of Science. Can we show citation data from more than one source if we have the subscriptions? That's a great question. Yeah, the Scopus support has been deprecated a while ago. That was a couple of years ago now. So we now only have Web of Science or Dimensions. Dimensions is automatically included. If you have a Web of Science subscription, do email support@altmetric.com, and we will work on gathering the credentials so that we can put that in your system. Absolutely. Doesn't cost anything, of course. That's a simple process for us to do. If any of you have the Explorer for Institutions now, and you have Web of Science and you have not got this included, it is just simply an extra tab on each article details page, where you would then, it would be called Web of Science. You click on that, you see the most recent 3. It then links you through to the Web of Science interface, where you then are authenticated and then can carry on. Incidentally, while I'm talking about that, it's probably worth showing to you if I can pick something that actually has some citations. Every now and again, I find that, remarkably, it is quite tricky to find one. Just do this, let's have a look. Yep, there's a good one. Okay, so this item here, lots of attention. There are 51 citations in Dimensions. You get this even if you're not a Dimensions customer, okay? So you'll see the most recent 3, you'll see the 51, and that link either there or down there or over here will take you to the Dimensions interface. Again, without having to log in. I am logged in, but if I weren't, I would also come here. So I can still see my Altmetric data. I can now see the 51 citations that this publication has received. You can see it really was from Munich, right? So down here somewhere is LMU, there they are. Right? So I really was gathering all of their data. You'll see the abstract. We even show the acknowledgements section. We'll show you who funded it. Here are the various fields of research that we've automatically added via machine learning. There's the clinical medicine unit of assessment. There are, of course, mesh terms, things like that, links to the full text. And you can see the references within the paper. You can even see a grant, and that is also available to non-Dimensions users. You can see what funded this and when it ran till, so this is one of the earlier of the items I looked at. There are the 51 citations. There's even a policy citation, which of course you also discovered up here, but that is also shown down here as well. So every item in Dimensions, by the way, is linked that way. So grants will show you the resulting publications, data sets will show you the resulting publication that has the data set, and so forth. But you will get to this page every time for free with any of the items in the Explorer. So there's a good amount of additional stuff that you can be using here for things like bolstering your case for impact. So that is always included. That is by default available. Even in the public badges, I think. Yeah, if you have an Altmetric details page, even if you're not a customer, one of my favorite non-customers is the University of Zurich, who have never been a customer of Altmetric or Dimensions, but they use both badges very nicely. And I have a feeling that even if I were to click on that, yep, there's the Dimensions citations. So you even see them on the public interface. So yep, same, it would look exactly the same thing with Web of Science, right? It would just be called Web of Science. You would see the most recent 3 items that they've had, the link to your Web of Science platform. Wow, that was a long answer, I do apologize. Can you do the Dimensions export for units of assessments if you don't have a subscription to Dimensions? No, unfortunately not. That is for our customers. That's why I said at the beginning that I'm assuming that the various institutions that are on the call will be hard at work to map these themselves, but Dimensions customers will be able to go and see those units of assessment that we have added in automatically for themselves. And let's put a fox amongst the pigeons. You can go and see the units of assessment of any other institution. Like we did with the poor people at Ludwig Maximilian University, who probably don't realize that they're being interrogated according to UK ref standards right now. But you could go and have a look at how the units of assessment for Cambridge or for Oxford or for Bristol or for Essex might be behaving. And of course, you could load those into the Altmetric Explorer and start doing some comparisons that your competing institutions perhaps cannot. The free version of Dimensions, I should point out, does have one set of fields of research, not units of assessment, and it looks like this. So the publications and the data sets are freely available to search, and the fields of research we've used are the ANZ SRC ones. So you can get a good, decent way in to the clinical medicine one. Clinical sciences, for example, is probably going to correspond to some of it. But for our customers, we took the extra step of taking the submissions from REF 2014, so that big data set of publications, and trained machine learning models on that so that it can understand what is in clinical medicine versus what is in another unit of assessment. So that is then in the licensed version of Dimensions. Another question here, in the list of identifiers, what do you mean by handle? Great question. Okay, so the handle system is related to the digital object identifier. It's mostly used within repositories, and it's essentially an adjunct to the DOI. It is a DOI for the institution, and they often look If you want to find out more, handle.net is the place as far as I remember. I haven't spent much time on here, but you can see here, for example, this is, for example, let's have a look and see if I can find an example of a prefix. Yeah, because you can register yourself as an institution and get a prefix on the handle.net registry, and that combines with the DOI, for example. So the way that you could do that search then, it acts a little bit like an ORCID, whereby we can recognize when a handle link has been used, and we then track that as a source of publications, because that is then an institutional link sharing research onto the web, or having been linked to in a news story. And so when you put a handle into the Explorer, in the advanced search, there's actually an ability where you can put the handle in itself. Where is it? Handle prefix, there it is. It even explains what that is. You would put a prefix in there and it would pull back actually every publication associated with that handle, very much like you would see every publication associated with an ORCID on an author level. This is more on a platform level that belongs to an institution, right? So that's sort of what it is. Yeah, more information at handle.net. I must say, it is not common to find handles in our database. They do appear, but it is minor compared to things like identifiers, because people don't tend to use the handle link. Very similar, perhaps not completely the reason why we still see publications that go to sciencedirect.com over the repository of the University of Southampton, for example. There's just a smaller audience for one of them than the other. We, of course, still aggregate both of those, so we will track repository links from Southampton and aggregate it with the DOI that belongs on the Science Direct platform. So two different users sharing from two different places, but it's the same item. We will collect those on the same place, so you don't get fragmented results. You will see attention for all of those. These are good questions. I like it. Is there work between yourselves and media outlets to try and improve the citations they give? A lot of our media articles don't get picked up because they don't give a proper citation. It means the academics get really frustrated with Altmetrics, which is a shame. Yeah, so we have tried to do this actually. We have a couple of customers that actually belong to media organizations. So national newspapers, for example, have accounts with us, partly because they want to see what is being talked about so that they can write newspaper articles that cover current research. Fascinatingly, it's a bit of an Ouroboros there. It's sort of see what's getting attention, react to it with an article, link to those items, and I suppose increases the attention even further. It's another reason why Altmetrics are important, I guess, actually, because it does self-encourage media to cover research as a point of interest, similar to when the Carbon Brief does its annual review of the most popular climate papers, another organization that we work with. And there was talk, at least, of us doing like a media awareness day where we would say, hey, if your stuff is paywalled, for example, can you make sure that the metadata on the article site where your paywalled newspaper article exists has enough data for us to find where research is going to be mentioned inside it, for example. Or can you make sure you always link to the piece of research, even if you don't cite it humanly in a correct way? The good news is that we have seen in general the trend increase in terms of linking to research, but there will always be cases, unfortunately, where someone says, new research from the University of Ghent on self-healing concrete looks promising, and then they won't do anything else. They won't refer to the researcher's name, or if they do, they haven't linked to their research. And so that then does cause frustrations with the researcher, because if they don't refer, if that newspaper article really does not refer to the research, we can't count it as a mention, because they aren't specifying a paper, they aren't specifying that piece of research that allows us to say that is definitely this item which has also been mentioned over here, and so forth. I should get off the Handle website, shouldn't I? It's much nicer to look at this. By the way, one thing I didn't touch on was the filter by open access. So for this search, we are still looking at our unit of assessment, let's say. It might be quite interesting to compare the attention that your open access items get versus the closed access items that belong to a particular unit of assessment, or for the unit of assessment belonging to perhaps the University of Munich, or indeed anybody else that you care to benchmark. So that is something you can do as well. I simply forgot to show that filter. That filter is always available for those different items. I'm expecting that that might be a very interesting talking point actually for some institutions that have mandated open access from an early time, and they now have a predominantly open access publication policy. I'm thinking particularly actually of Californian institutions that now, and have done for a while, mostly published open access as a state, and to see the increase in audience mapped to the audience that you would see from closed publications as well. Very good. That seems to exhaust all of the questions. It very nearly exhausts our time, actually. You've been very kind. We have about 5 minutes to go. If there are no other questions, I will leave it there. And thank you again all for turning up. I hope it was helpful. If there are questions you are too embarrassed to ask or which only occur to you afterwards, I will move to my final slide, ben@altmetric.com. You can hit us up on Twitter, of course, @Altmetric. And you can email me or ask us questions there, and we will be happy to answer them. And with that, thank you very much for your time. And oh, hang on, I'm just going to make sure there was one other quick one. Oh, yep, that's good. There was just a note of thanks. Well, thank you also. And with that, yes, thank you very much for attending. We will be distributing the slides, the videos. Go and have a look at that amazing stuff from VUM Sadam. We will put you in touch with them if you want. They are an extremely innovative bunch. I tell our own marketing and development teams that they use our data more impressively than we do, specifically for the UN stuff. Their visualizations are really great. You can look at that in your own time and read the sort of the small print on how they put everything together. It's really fascinating. Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good rest of the day and good luck with REF 2021.